Hello, and welcome to this lesson on how to use MLA format, specifically how to do a works cited entry and put your citations in your paragraph. Today's lesson is just going to show you the basics. So a lot of times, MLA format is stressful for students, so hopefully you can come back to this lesson and slide through the slides and get to what you need to know and let me teach it to you as you do it. And that way, you won't be so much to remember at one time. I recommend that you go ahead and do your works cited page with me while I'm doing mine. Pull up your source and open up the things that I'm going to be opening, and that way you can work with me instead of having to remember everything to do on your own. So, when you are using research, it means that you've got to learn something about a topic that you don't know. And that also means that you'll be using sources from other people. So you may be using sources like websites, scholarly journals, magazines, encyclopedia articles, books, interviews, videos, and the list goes on and on and on. So that means that you have to give credit to your source. Otherwise, you'll be guilty of plagiarism. So you need to do that in two places. You do it within the paragraph so that your reader knows exactly where each thing that you have comes from. Those are called in-text citations. And then you also need to do so at a list at the end of your paper, and we call that your works cited page. So your works cited page looks like this. It's simply a list of all your sources. Note that it's in alphabetical order. It goes D, F, and so on. Note that each source is listed by hanging indent. So this is one source. The second and third line are scooted over, so it's easy to see where a new one starts. The second source is only one line long. The third source is only one line long. And then the fourth source is 3 lines long, and the second and third lines of that source are scooted over. It's called hanging indent. So each type of source in MLA format has a certain way that you're supposed to put it in order so that everybody's using the same format so that anybody could go look up a source that anybody else used. Well, it gets a little tedious sometimes remembering what order to put that in. So we're going to use a site called Citation Machine to make it easy for us to build this page. And I'll show you how in just a minute. So that's the first way that you need to give credit. The second way is that you need to have citations within your paragraph. So what a citation does is it's a parenthesis that comes at the end of a sentence. If you look at this first arrow here, see how it says fast in quotation marks? So if you will look on this sample works cited page, that's coming from Fast Facts, Centers for Disease Control, blah, 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 blah. So what MLA format asks you to do is to just give an abbreviation of the entire source in the paragraph in parentheses. It's kind of like, consider your full name. If your full name was George Howard Smith, it would be weird if every time somebody spoke to you, they had to say your full name. George Howard Smith, please hand me that piece of paper. George Howard Smith, can I have a piece of gum? I mean, it would just get weird. Same way here. Instead of having to put this entire works cited entry in the paper every time, we're just putting an abbreviation of that works cited entry, and that happens to be the first word of the works cited entry. Notice that it matches exactly because fast happens to be a title and it's in quotation marks. We would put the first word in quotation marks here. A lot of times this is an author's last name, and a lot of times we're using internet sources that don't have page numbers, but if you're using a book, you would add the page number as well. So let's say that this citation was a book. It would just be quotation marks, fast quotation marks, 32, and then you would end your parentheses. So when do you need to have one of these citations? Every time you use any information from your author. If you use a quote, if you put any information in your own words, if you borrow your author's opinion, if you use a picture or an image, note my citation innovative underneath my picture. Yep, that's any time at all you use a source. So this could get a little overwhelming. And that's where citationmachine.net comes in handy. Now, if you don't have internet access, I have included a rather lengthy keynote that has examples that you can use instead. But if you have, and you'll find that on the agenda, but if you have internet access, Citation Machine will make your works cited page a breeze. So go ahead and open up citationmachine.net. You will also find the link to that on the agenda. And then go ahead and click on Create Citations. Now, Citation Machine does more than one format. MLA format is for the disciplines of history and literature. APA format is for science. So make sure that your URL address says MLA at the end of it. If it says APA, you'll need to erase that and put MLA instead. So the first thing we're going to do here is choose which type of source we are using. I happen to be demonstrating a website, and I bet that's probably what you're using too. So the next thing you'll do is click Website. If you're using a different source, know that you can click on More, and there's like 50-something different sources that you can choose here. So if you have a source that's weird, you'll have to select here what type it is first. Okay, so Citation Machine works for us. If you're doing a website, all you have to do is follow these instructions right here by entering its URL. That's your entire address up here, all the way from the hudjadapa all the way to the .com or whatever it is. So what you're going to do is just simply enter in the URL address and hit search. If you're using a book, you can do the title, or you can look at the code that the person would scan at the cash register and type in the number that's next to that code. That's called the URL, sorry, it just left me, the UPC code, I think. And you can find a book that way as well. So we're going to hit search, and then yay, Citation Machine. Notice that it has found my source, Kids Who Face Toxic Danger Study Finds. So I'm going to hit Cite right here. But I have to remember that computers can mess up. Sometimes Citation Machine gets this wrong because it's a computer program that guesses what's my title and what's my author's name. So I have to check the information. So let's do that now. WebMD is my website title. I know that because it's what's first right here. My article title is Kids Who Vape Face Toxic Danger Study Finds. Sometimes you may be on a website that doesn't necessarily have an article. If that's the case, you just leave the article title blank and just put in the website title. My author's name is Dennis Thompson, and my publication date happens to be at the top of my article. That's March 5th, 2018. If I don't have any of that information, like my author's name or a date right here, then I just leave those boxes blank, either when I'm checking them. By the way, if Citation Machine doesn't find it for me, I just have to fill in the boxes myself. It just so happens, oh, by the way, if you're using a website that says like staff writer as your author, please don't put staff writer in as your author. That's just weird because that's not somebody's name. So don't put anything in the author's box unless it really is an author's name. Okay. So it looks like Citation Machine has gotten these top things correct. If I happen to have two authors, then I would just click in blue where it says add another contributor, and I would put somebody else's name there as well. So I haven't been able to see yet if my publisher and sponsor is correct. Where in the world would I find that? Sometimes it's there and sometimes it's not. Most of the time, if you will scroll to the very bottom of your page and look for a copyright symbol, that's the C in the circle. By the way, if you don't have a date at the top of the page and you have a date after your copyright, you would add just that year to the box and leave the month and the day blank. But if I have a copyright symbol, then my publisher or sponsor will be beside it. So notice WebMD LLC is my sponsor. So I'm going to make that correction in my publisher sponsor field because they didn't include the LLC, and I want to be as correct as possible. So then I will just go ahead and hit Complete Citation. Now I am ready to put my citation onto my Pages document. So open up your Pages document where you may or may not have written your paragraph or your information already. And you're going to put that works cited at the top of the last page. And you want it to stay at the top of the last page. So what you're going to do is you're going to go up to this, what looks like a backwards P with a line beside it, and you're going to choose Page Break. So that what happens is on the second page of your paper, you have this nice dark line. You're going to type the words works cited, centered at the top, and then hit enter, and then change your justification back to uncentering. You want to change it back to left justification. And then we're ready to put our works cited entry on this page. So go back to Citation Machine, and you'll click on the snowman beside your source, and then choose Copy Citation. Do not copy the citation straight off the page. Doing so will mess you up in two ways. One, you may have a green background on your works cited, and two, it's not going to be formatted correctly. Citation Machine, as you can see here, once you paste it, is going to automatically do your hanging indent for you, which is nice because it's kind of tricky to get that to hanging indent correctly. And tabbing can only cause you problems later. So you want to copy and paste it from the snowman menu. But however, for some reason, Citation Machine doesn't get our font right. MLA format requires that we use Times New Roman. So highlight your source and change your font to Times New Roman. The other thing Citation Machine, the MLA requires is that we have double spacing. So while your works cited entry is still highlighted, go ahead and choose spacing and change it to double. So your works cited should look just like this. No extra spaces. It should have hanging indent. If I have other sources, remember I need to list them in alphabetical order. But this is what my works cited page should look like as I build it. So I have half of my plagiarism my anti-plagiarism taken care of. I have my source at the end. So I just need to make sure that throughout my paragraph that I have the first word of that works cited at the end of the sentence where I use any information from my source. I have used my source twice because I was peeing on my paragraph. And I have an example that I've explained and another example that I've explained. So notice that I happen to have Thompson in there twice. It is not a requirement to use only one source in a paragraph. It just so happens that I use this source twice back to back. Okay, for other information, if your source starts with an A, an, or a the, and those don't count as first real words. So skip those when alphabetizing and skip those when making your citation. If you happen to have two works cited entries that start with the same first word, then you'll need to add two words to your works cited instead of just one, so that your reader can tell the difference between one and the other. So you'll put the first word and then the second word that's unique only to that source. And you can put a comma if you skip words. I know this is a little confusing. If you need help, just let me know. And notice that when you add your citation to your paragraph, it goes after the last word but before the period. See my sample citation, right? Period. MLA format says do this even if there are quotation marks. See how the period still goes after the citation. I know it looks a little funny after you've been putting periods right beside the word all your livelong life. Okay, a few other things. If you have two sentences from the same source back to back and you don't have any quotes in there, then you can just put one citation at the end of that sentence. Otherwise, you need a citation at the end of every single sentence that you use a source. And sometimes you may take notes on a source and then end up not using it in your paper. If you add it to your works cited and then end up not using it, remember to erase it so that you don't have something on the works cited that's not cited in the paper. Each works cited entry should have a matching citation somewhere in the paper and vice versa. And finally, here's my works cited for the images on this presentation. I hope this helps. Let me know if you have questions.